Hello, DM Geezer Jim here, continuing along our reading the frickin' manual, reading the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. We are going through line by line, word by word in audiobook mode. The first part of the video is just me reading the book as it is. The second few minutes is usually me offering a little bit of commentary based on my experience as a professional dungeon master and a guy that's been playing since '83, but I am a 5e guy, so it is in context with that. This is a long section. This video will probably be 30, maybe 40 minutes by the time we're done with the hazard section, including my comments. I'll try to keep it around 30, but hell, let's get into it, right? So, Chapter 3, DM's Toolbox, Hazards. The Player's Handbook describes common hazards that adventurers encounter, such as falling and dehydration. This section details some of the more unusual hazards you can add to a location to make it more challenging. Severity and level. Each hazard in this section is designated as a nuisance or as a deadly for characters of certain levels. A nuisance hazard is unlikely to seriously harm characters of the indicated levels, whereas a deadly hazard can grievously damage characters of the indicated levels. Use caution when introducing a hazard to characters of a level lower than the hazard's level range. A hazard that is a nuisance at one level could be deadly to the characters in the next lower range. Example hazards. As always, remember, these are examples. These are guidance. This is not a comprehensive list, but there's a lot here. So the first thing we're going to read about is brown mold. Deadly hazards for levels 5 to 10, or a nuisance hazard for levels 11 through 16. Brown mold resembles a furry light brown carpet. This fungus feeds on warmth, drawing heat from anything around itself. One patch of brown mold covers a 10-foot square, and the temperature within 30 feet of the patch is always frigid. When a creature enters a space within 5 feet of the mold for the first time on a turn or starts its turn there, the creature makes a DC 12 Constitution saving throw, taking 4d10 cold damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful save. Brown mold has immunity to fire damage, and any source of fire brought within 5 feet of it causes the mold to instantly expand across a surface and towards the fire, creating a new patch that covers a 10-foot square. A patch of brown mold exposed to an effect that deals any amount of cold damage is destroyed instantly. Our next little buddy is the fireball fungus. This is a deadly hazard for levels 5 through 10. A fireball fungus is a small inanimate mushroom that can grow anywhere fungi are found in abundance. Its luminous orange cap sheds bright light in a 15-foot radius and dim light for an additional 15 feet beyond. A fireball fungus has armor class 10, hit points 6, and immunity to psychic damage. When it drops to 0 hit points, the fungus explodes as if a fireball spell with a spell save of DC 15, it would be dexterity, had been centered upon it. At higher levels, the explosion of a fireball fungus causes other fireball fungi in the area of effect to explode as well. You can scale the hazard for higher levels by adding 1 additional fungus for levels 11 to 16 or 3 for levels 17 through 20. The next one is the green slime. This is a nuisance hazard for levels 1 through 4. Acidic green slime devours flesh, organic material, and metal on contact. Bright green, wet, and sticky, it clings to walls, floors, and ceilings in patches. One patch of green slime covers a 5-foot square. Green slime has blind sight with a range of 30 feet, and it drops from walls and ceilings when it detects movement below itself. Beyond that, it cannot move. A creature aware of the slime's presence can avoid being struck by it with a successful DC 10 dexterity saving throw. Excuse me. A creature that comes in contact with the green slime takes 1d10 acid damage. The creature takes the damage again at the start of each of its turns until the slime is scraped off or destroyed. Against wood or metal, green slime deals 2d10 acid damage each round, and any non-magical wood or metal item used to scrape off the slime is then destroyed. Direct sunlight or any amount of cold, fire, or radiant damage destroys a patch of green slime. Infernos, big fires, deadly hazards for levels 5 through 10, or nuisance hazards for levels 11 through 16. Whenever an uncontrolled fire spreads, it can create an inferno that quickly engulfs creatures, objects, and vegetation. An inferno consists of at least 4 contiguous 10-foot cubes of fire. Each of the Inferno's 10-foot cubes can be doused with 10 gallons of water. Exposure to a strong wind for 1 minute causes the Inferno to grow, adding 1 die 4 new 10-foot cubes to its volume. An Inferno deprived of fuel burns itself out after 1d10 minutes. An Inferno damages any vegetation or object that isn't being worn or carried that touches it, dealing 4d10 fire damage immediately and again at the end of each minute. Any creature that enters the Inferno for the first time on a turn or starts its turn there takes 4d10 fire damage and is burning. Poisonous gas is our next one. This is nuisance hazards for levels 1 through 4. Poisonous gas is usually encountered in an enclosed space such as a sewer or a sealed tomb. The gas fills as much space as it can, occupying a maximum of 10 10-foot cubes. The transparent gas carries a foul odor. The gas is continuously or periodically replenished by some natural or magical source, though a strong wind disperses the gas for 1 minute. Any creature that enters poisonous gas for the first time of a turn or starts its turn there makes a DC 12 Constitution saving throw, taking 1d10 poison damage on fail save or half as much on a successful one. Creatures in the gas also have disadvantage on death saving throws. At higher levels, you can scale the hazard for higher levels by increasing the poison damage and the save DC as shown in the following table below. If you're in audiobook mode, the table has 3 columns. The furthest left column lists the levels. The middle column is the damage, how many dice of damage will do, and the right column reflects the save DCs. These saves are typically Constitution. Levels 5 through 10 will face 2d10 of poison damage with a save of 14. 11 through 16 will face 4d10 damage with a save of 16. And levels 17 through 20 could face up to 10d10 damage with a save DC of 18 for poisonous gas. The next section is the quicksand pit. This is a nuisance hazards for levels 1 through 4. A quicksand pit is 10 feet deep and covers the ground in a 10-foot square. A creature that enters the area sinks 1d4 plus 1 feet into the quicksand and is then restrained. At the start of each of its creature's turns, it sinks another 1d4 feet. As long as the creature is not completely submerged in quicksand, it can take an action to try to escape, doing so with a successful strength athletics check, not a save, DC 10 plus the number of feet the creature has sunk into the quicksand. A creature that is completely submerged in quicksand has total cover and the blinded condition and risks suffocation. A creature can pull another creature within its reach out of a quicksand pit by taking an action and succeeding on a strength athletics check with a DC 5 plus the number of feet that the creature that is sunk into the quicksand has fallen. At higher levels, you can scale this hazard for higher levels by making the pit deeper and increasing the number of feet a creature sinks at the start of each of its turns, as shown in the following table. Left column is the levels, 5 to 10, etc. The middle column is the depth of the pit itself, and the right column is going to reflect the rate that the players are sinking when they get into this pit. So levels 5 through 10, this can be a nuisance with a 15-foot deep pit and a sinking rate of 1d6 feet per round. 11 through 16 can use a 20-foot deep pit with 1d8 sinking rate, and a 17 through 20 group will find a nuisance with a 30-foot pit and 1d10 feet. Before we go too far, a couple things. I know saving comments, but this is a little bit more of a clarification, not necessarily a comment. You're going to have to do math. Your players could start out anywhere between a minimum of 3 feet to a maximum of 9 feet into this pit before they can make their first escape. Because when they first get into the pit, they're going to sink immediately 1d4 plus 1 feet, and at the start of their first turn, they'll sink another 1d4 feet. Okay? Once they are fully submerged, they cannot extract themselves. As long as the creature isn't completely submerged, it can take an action. But once it's submerged, someone else has to pull them out. That's just the one little bit of a clarification I want to make on that one. Razorvine is our next one. A nuisance hazard for levels 1 through 4. Razorvine is a plant that grows in wild tangles and hedges. It also clings to the sides of buildings and other surfaces as ivy does. A 10-foot high, 10-foot wide, 5-foot thick wall or hedge of Razorvine has an armor class of 11, 25 hit points, and immunity to bludgeoning, piercing, and psychic damage. When a creature comes into contact with Razorvine for the first time on a turn, the creature must succeed on a DC 10 Dexterity savings throw, or take 1d10 slashing damage from the blade-like thorns. Quick little clarification. I know I've said it a couple times in the series, but sometimes when you're seeing the damage that a trap, a creature, whatever's doing, you'll see two numbers. The first one is a solid number. The second one represents the dice. First number is the average damage that is done by this particular hazard, if you need an idea. River Styx. This is a nuisance hazard for levels 11 through 16. The river Styx courses through the lower planes. Tasting or touching its waters can shatter a creature's intellect and personality, as well as strip away its memories. Certain fiends are immune to the river's effects. Unless immune to the river's effects, a creature that drinks from the Styx, enters the river, or starts its turn in the river makes a DC 20 intelligence saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes 3d12 psychic damage and can't cast spells or take the magic action for 30 days. An affected creature can drink from the Styx and swim in its waters without suffering any additional effects. This effect can be ended only by the Greater Restoration, Heal, or Wish spell. If the effect isn't ended after 30 days, the effect becomes permanent and the creature loses all of its memories. At that point, nothing short of a Wish spell or Divine Intervention can undo the effect. Water taken from the river Styx loses its potency after 24 hours, becoming a harmless, foul-tasting liquid. Arcanoloths, night hags, and other fell creatures might know rituals that can prolong the water's potency at your discretion. Rock Slide. Deadly hazard. Levels 1 through 4. When a rock slide occurs, every creature in its path makes a DC 15 Dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes 2d10 bludgeoning damage, has the prone condition, and moves with the rock slide. On a successful save, a creature takes half as much damage only. When the rock slide stops, its space becomes difficult terrain, and all prone creatures in its space are buried under rock and debris. A creature buried in this way has the restrained condition and has total cover. As an action, a creature can try to crawl out from under the rock pile. If the creature succeeds on a DC 15 Strength Athletics check, it is no longer restrained. Instead, it has the prone condition and is atop the rock pile. If the check fails, the creature remains buried and gains 1 exhaustion level. A creature that has neither the incapacitated nor the restrained condition can spend 1 minute freeing another creature buried by the rock slide. At higher levels, you can scale this hazard for higher levels by increasing the bludgeoning damage as follows. 4d10 for levels 5 to 10, 10d10s for levels 11 through 16, and 18d10s for levels 17 through 20. This is for a deadly hazard. The next entry is Vicious Vine, nuisance hazards for levels 1 through 4. Vicious vines are animated by magic. They often cling to doorways, archways, walls, and statuary. Until a vicious vine moves, there's nothing to distinguish it from an inanimate vine. Each vicious vine has armor classes 11, hit points 16, and immunity to bludgeoning, piercing, and psychic damage. When a creature enters a space within 5 feet of the vine for the first time on a turn, or starts its turn there, the vine tries to coil around that creature. The target must succeed on a DC 12 Dexterity saving throw or have the grappled condition with an escape DC of 12. That would be your athletics check to escape. While grappled in this way, the target takes 1d10 necrotic damage from the vine's life-draining thorns at the start of each of the target's turn. The vine can grapple only one creature at a time. As an influence action, a character under the effect of Speak with Plants spell or similar magic can try to persuade the vine to release its victim, doing so with a successful DC 10 Charisma Persuasion check. A creature released by the vine in this way won't be attacked by that vine again for the next 24 hours. At higher levels, you can scale this hazard for higher levels by increasing the necrotic damage, the save DC, and the escape DC as shown in the following table. The left column reflects the levels of your party, the middle column reflects the damage increase in necrotic damage, and the right column reflects the save or escape DC. Levels 5 through 10 will face 2d10 in necrotic damage and a save escape DC of 14. 11 through 16s will be facing 4d10 and save escape DCs of 16. Levels 17 through 20 could be facing necrotic damage of 10d10 and save escapes of up to 18. These are dexterity checks for the save and probably athletics checks for the escape. The next section is webs. Almost done with this chapter. Hey, okay. Nuisance hazard, levels 1 through 4. Giant spiders weave thick, sticky webs across passages and at the bottoms of pits to snare prey. These web-filled areas are difficult terrain. A creature that enters a web-filled area for the first time on a turn or starts its turn there must succeed on a DC 12 dexterity saving throw or have the restrained condition. As an action, a creature restrained by the web can try to escape from them, doing so with a successful DC 12 strength, athletics, or dexterity acrobatics check. Each 10-foot cube of web has armor class 10, hit points 15. They are vulnerable to fire damage, but immune to piercing poison and psychic damage. And then we get to yellow mold, and this will be the last part of our hazards section. Yellow mold is considered a deadly hazard for levels 1 through 4 or a nuisance hazard for levels 5 through 10. Yellow mold grows in dark places, and one patch covers a 5-foot square. If touched, the mold ejects a cloud of spores that fills a 10-foot cube. Any creature in that area must succeed on a DC 15 Constitution saving throw or take 2d10 poison damage and have the poisoned condition, which gives you disadvantage on attacks and ability checks, for 1 minute. While poisoned this way, the creature takes 1d10 poison damage at the start of each of its turns. The creature repeats a save at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. Direct sunlight or any amount of fire damage destroys a patch of yellow mold. So that's our hazards section. The next one will be marker prestige, but let's do a quick little chit-chat on hazards. First and foremost, these are example hazards. They can all be adjusted for various character levels. But I think the important thing to note here is that your players should be aware of the presence of hazards to an extent. Each of the hazards listed here, for the most part, there should be the chance for your players to be aware of a hazard before you inflict it, especially a deadly hazard. You know, the first example would be your brown mold. The temperature within 30 feet of it's always frigid. Your characters, irrespective of their perception, when going from a 60-degree cave to a 0-degree area, walking within 30 feet, it's an immediate effect. They'll notice it immediately, and we have the job to make them aware of the change in the atmosphere for the brown mold. Likewise, the fireball fungus, they give themselves away. There's bright light and a dim light here and there. Kind of an orangish light appears around the corner of this patch of mushrooms. That's unusual. You don't have to go any farther than that than making sure that they understand it. The green slime is on its own. I do remember the older green slimes used to be a much bigger deal because they didn't care if your items were magical or not. They would eat straight through. So if you really wanted to increase the level of green slime, let them eat through magical items. Give them the abilities of a rust monster, which each round it degrades the armor by a factor of 1 until it hits a -5 or -10, then it's useless, for example. A couple different ways you can add to a green slime. It's very little threat to the players themselves. But when you start threatening the players' equipment, suddenly a nuisance hazard is much more than nuisance. Next thing we're going to kind of scroll through is Infernos. Infernos, keep this one in mind. I would definitely say that out of a lot of these hazards, an Inferno happens a lot more often than you think, primarily because of players shooting fireballs, burning hands, flame strike, etc., depending on the terrain they're in. If you're in a dusty old library in the bottom of a pyramid and someone drops a fireball, the whole room becomes an inferno. So these rules are very useful to keep track of. If there's a lot of fire use, explosives, and things like that, and you're in a dry, woody area, then an inferno becomes a thing really quickly. So make sure that you keep some of these things on, however you want to track your notes. If you're using index cards, spreadsheets, or referring to the book, this section is definitely worth bookmarking in your DM's guide. This is one of the few times where I'm going to say, if you're going to be familiar with the book, but it doesn't hurt to commit some of these things to memory. It doesn't hurt to commit some of these things to your regular resources. Likewise with poisonous gases. Simple, but you can also add other effects such as paralyzation, petrification, blindness, deafness, confusion. The poisonous gas gambit's going to run. Now, one aside on this, and this is going to apply to the entirety of this section. Most of your published modules, most of your published adventures will contain these hazards and the appropriate stats and the appropriate DCs for, as well as descriptions for hazards that your players are going to run into. I believe this section is explicitly put out for us to use for our own homebrewing, for our own building. Because any module, any adventure that has poisonous gas is going to have all this information there as well. So I don't want to go as far as saying commit these to memory for anything more than your home building. You're running published modules, all of this stuff is taken care of within your books. So, but yeah, this is part of your toolbox for homebrewing, for world building, for making slight adjustments, for rule of cooling, and in the case of hazards, rule of uncooling. Razorvine, this can be used for, these basic ideas behind Razorvine can be used for any kind of spiky, hostile, sprawly plants. Hedges of cactus. Your players fall off of a griffin and land to a patch of cactus. You can use these numbers for that. Razorvine is actually traditionally a little bit more potent as it grows in the alleys and the streets of Sigil, winding its way through the multiverse from there. Now the River Styx, I could go on and on and on about this section. All I'm going to say is if you are new to D&D, you're new to running a game, the effects here are sufficient. If you're an experienced DM, or you know more about the lore of the River Styx, you feel a certain way about it, do what you feel is right. The River Styx is this iconic, legendary thing that is horrifying to deal with. I don't necessarily think that the effects that are listed here are potent enough, but they are a great starting point for a new DM. Rock slides. One of the things to keep in mind with the rock slide is the moves with the rock slide part of it. A rock slide is a hazard that's going to take a little bit more planning on your side as the DM, meaning you need to be aware of the slope dynamics that are in play. If it's coming down the hill and flattening on a flat area, then the rock slide buries the characters and stops. If you're on the side of a mountain, say I don't want to go too crazy. Well, keep it simple, sorry. If you're on the side of a mountain or a little bit of a switchback of a road, the rock slide is going to come down, but it's going to keep going. So be aware of when you're describing and setting it up. Make sure that you know where this rock slide is going to end, and make sure it makes sense for the players. If they've been on this steep cliff the entire time and a rock slide sweeps them down, it sweeps them down. So there could be falling damage involved with this in addition to the rock slide. So use caution with that. Try not to go with too steep of a slope, because the 2d10 bludgeoning damage plus the 1d6 per 10 feet falling can add up very quickly to obliterate a party. So I would say with the rock slide, be aware of the environment. It wouldn't hurt to draw yourself a little bit of a figure, a little bit of a map, so you know how far this thing can carry your players with it. Slides aren't going to do as much in regards to falling damage because they're rolling with the rocks. Verticals, avalanches, that can mess your party up really bad. So pay attention to those little details there. The vicious vines, man, this is a good guideline for you to kind of design your own hostile monsters or hostile plants. There's a lot of them out there, especially if you start digging around in the old stuff, the Dark Sun, the stuff in Athos. That setting had the meanest plants in the entirety of the multiverse. And if you really need some mean plants, do a little bit of digging back into 2E Dark Sun. But anyway, this is a good benchmark for you to have any sort of hostile plants, whether it's the thorny vines or it's a bitey, life-sucky giant a Venus flytrap that bites your players. This is a good starting point to work with them, and I like that they gave you the rules to adjudicate when a player decides that they want to do a speak with plants. Here you go. So we're almost done with this little bit of a section. I know it's a little lengthy, sorry. Webs. Remember, this is for giant spider webs. This isn't for the cobwebs. This isn't for the dozens of tarantulas and or whatever kind of spiders you want to have that are going around. This is for your giant spiders. So if this is a room full of dusty large spiders and regular spiders, you can have webs that aren't necessarily going to do anything more than giving you a light obscurement. But if it's giant spiders, cave fishers, things that have those eder caps as well, things that actually use heavy webs, this is the section you're going to want to use. Always remember, it's going to be tedious, but every time they enter a square that has a web-filled area, they start their turn with a saving throw. You can easily make it 2-3 squares and suddenly be restrained. Some new DMs have them make the saving throw right out the gate and then they ignore the web. No, if you're using the webs, if they're in the room, they apply at all times. When your players decide to burn them up, which they invariably will, don't forget to go ahead and hit them with some smoke. Smoke's going to cause some obscurement. You could go ahead and maybe give them poison condition while they're huffing on all of this dead web smoke. The more dense the webs, the smaller the room, the more the smoke. So even though it doesn't necessarily say that, yellow mold is the next thing. It's going to give you out spores. Spores that do damage and spores that give you a condition. This yellow mold can be turned into pink mold, and instead of poisoned for damage, they poison for confusion, etc., etc. Most of your dungeon hazards are going to import either damage or conditions. Some of the mental conditions that you can drop into here. So that, before we go too far, a lot of times you're going to be looking at combining some of these hazards. Webs with poisonous gas. You burn the webs, they become a little bit of a noxious vapor. Not a ton of damage, but, 1d4, 1d6 as you cough your way through it. Nothing, just a little bit of a nuisance, as it were. You can combine. Now, obviously, you're not going to put brown mold in with yellow mold because the fire. Well, I guess if you wanted to be really evil, you could. Here's an example of doing that. Any amount of fire will destroy a patch of yellow mold. Any amount of fire will be absorbed by a brown mold. So the yellow mold now suddenly becomes an issue because the brown mold will suck up the fire and continue expanding out. So lo and behold, now you combine two things that are deadly hazard or nuisance hazards become a deadly hazard. So you can absolutely, and you will definitely find yourself combining these hazards into larger things during an encounter. A fireball fungus can quickly become an inferno. Quicksand pit, with green slime above it is now really, really, really bad, etc., etc. So ultimately, with the hazards, have fun being creative. Make sure that you pay attention to the if-then, the causation. When this happens, that could lead to that, which could lead to this. But never set up so many hazards where your players are dead, okay? Unless, and second thing is if you're using very dangerous hazards, your players have to be aware of the presence. A rock slide is coming down. They should hear the rumble, or something that sounds like thunder in a cloudless sky. Slight little, did you feel that? One or two little rocks tumbling down, followed by a small shower of pebbles, followed by, a rock slide. So above all else, make sure your hazards are appropriate for your group level, and make sure that there is a possibility of your players noticing and being able to react to the hazards before you trigger them on them. There should always be a chance for their awareness, their perception, to catch it before they become the victim of it. But hey, man, that's the end of this section. Pretty lengthy. The next one's going to be Marker Prestige. Marker Prestige is a little bit more of an advanced section. Yes, I've already read everything up to this point. It's okay. A second round is not a big deal. But so, hey, thanks so much for hanging out. Push those like buttons, follow buttons, subscribe buttons. Join us over on Twitch if you want to chat in live time. But this is DM Geezer Jim ending this section. Thank you for your time. We'll see you soon.